How do I select which groups come down and present out their response from a given group activity? It depends. If I have a very small class, then it's easy to see all the responses at the end of the group discussion time, and I've gone around and I've spoken to every group, and so I have more information about everyone's response. So I can make choices more easily in a small group environment than I can in a large. But let's talk about that challenging one first. In a large group environment, a 200-person class where I have 50 groups, it's difficult for me to see everyone's response prior to the point at which I'd want people to come down and record. And so as I'm walking around, either I pick some of the people whom I see as I'm walking around and I choose to have them come down and record. I think that they have really solid responses. But that's another question. Do I pick people who have solid responses or people who have less solid responses and are going to be more edifying when they voice those and people can think back later and say, yeah, that's what I thought at first. But then I remember we had a discussion on top of that and we thought about it more and we came up with this decision. That's a choice for you to make. Another couple of choices for you to make include, do you have the discussion as a class before you ask people to record out, or is the very first thing that you do after the group work time has ended having people come down and record their responses? Very different products may occur from those. If you want an unadulterated response of what the person had written on the board, then do it immediately. Say, alright, good, we're done. I've identified 2 or 3 or however many groups. Let's have them come down and they'll say their things first. They'll say them to the class will hear what they have to say, and then we can start a discussion on top of that and we can bring in other ideas. That's entirely possible, and if you wish to do that, feel free. Another option is identify those groups in advance and then have the discussion as a group. And then the presenters in those groups will say, alright, this is what my group said, and it's still on my board, I'm not going to change it at all, it's in my hands now. But here are the things that I've heard from the discussion, and that can supplement the way that I explain what's on my board. Or I can even add a little bit to it and just say, yeah, this, also another example that would be interesting, and then voice that example, even if that comes in from a different group. Again, what's the criterion for you? Do you want to see the unadjusted response that those people would have given, or do you want the most effective consensus from the entire class? It's a question for you to answer. Just be deliberate about the way that you do it. Now, another point that I referred to a moment ago, do you pick people before the discussion period, while you're walking around, while the groups are working on the group activity, or do you pick people afterwards? Do you listen to people who made really compelling points and say, that was a great point, the way that you said that was great, come on down and record that now? Or do you pick people who haven't said a word during the entire thing? Do you keep them as your ace in the hole so that they haven't voiced their opinions and they come down and they're stating new information back to the group? Think about how important that is. If they've already said the thing and they're just saying it again, then the group can kind of get that to gel in their head if that's an important thing to them. But if these are people who haven't spoken yet, then it's just like a continuation of that discussion. The class is hearing new content, they're going to be listening to the person who's presenting it. It just happens to be recorded on a video at the same time. All of these options depend on the sort of classroom environment in which you're working, but another thing to be concerned about is, what if you always see one group that you're always picking to come down and present? Either the person's really articulate or they work very well together and they come up with great responses. You can do that if you'd like. What's your criterion, once again? Is it to get the most high-quality responses recorded, or is it to spread around the experience in front of the camera, or what? Now, there is one caveat on that. It's unlikely that the group that would form, that would come up with these great ideas, is going to even exist, because one of the parts of this model that I apply is getting people to mix into new groups, so that I'm not just comfortable working with the 3 other people with whom I'm familiar, but anyone in the classroom. Somebody comes in and we just enmesh and keep going. And so that group isn't going to exist. You probably won't have the one group that always has great ideas, because that one group just isn't a thing. It's an emergent property of group formation that doesn't occur the same way every time. But you could still have a single presenter who's really effective. And then it's up to you. The same sort of classroom management issues that you deal with if you had a really articulate student who always asks all the questions or always answers all the questions. Some people cater to that and say, great, we have one person who's going to speak for the entire class. Some people try to subvert that and say, all right, we've heard from you from today. Now it's important that we hear from other people. So again, all these options are open to you, and it's up to you to think through all of these sorts of particularities and think what kind of product you want recorded onto video.